Charlie, thank you for joining us indeed. We're really looking forward, of course, to the Kazoo Classics and the Derby on the Saturday. And I suppose just the name, the Derby, must bring back the most incredible memories from 3 years ago in Masar.
Oh, for sure, yeah. It's one of those very special days that will go down in history for myself and the team, and but it will never be forgotten, for sure. Like I say, with His Highness, and the royal family all being here, and it being the first horse to carry the Godolphin blue colours, it was a special day, but hopefully it's something we can try and repeat.
You've brought a couple of horses here this morning. One ruler who was 6th in the Guineas. What was your assessment overall to take away from the 2,000 Guineas with him?
Funny enough, it was one of those races that, going into the race, his work had been good. We obviously had some great 2-year-old form there, winning the Autumn Stakes and second in the race in Post Trophy. Obviously on the day, Master Seas was the horse that was going off as favourite there, or joint favourite. And as the race sort of began, obviously first when they jump from the gates, you try and keep an eye on them all. But you could see that one ruler was keen. For the first 2 furlongs, he was taking James on, and we were setting a nice tempo up on the front end with Adam riding Naval Crown. So he was taking James on. Then obviously from there on, from the halfway point, that sort of the focus had then switched to where Master of the Seas was. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until I went back and watched the replay at how pleased I was with one ruler's run, because for as keen as he was potentially going to run the race the wrong way round. But from 3 down there, where he could quite easily have just quietly dropped back through the field again there, he hit the line galloping out strong again. So James's take on it on the day was, he rode like the 1.25 mile horse there on ground that was too quick for him. So as we know, his autumn form there on soft ground was his best form. So therefore we sort of made the decision that from there and then we were going to roll the dice and go straight to the Derby.
I suppose when you look back, and it's easy to say now after the Guineas, but you look back at Newmarket in October, and then what he did behind Magellan in the race at Doncaster as well. It's more the sort of 2-year-old profile of a more of a stay 1.5 mile type anyway, when he was put away to the back end of last year. Was that always in the back of the mind that he'd be getting a bit further this summer anyway?
No, yes. I mean, after the Autumn Stakes, I'll be honest with you, I thought he travelled in. His pedigree doesn't scream out 1.5 miles. So, needless to say, after the Autumn Stakes, a few people posed the question of whether he'd be a Derby horse, and so my immediate go-to was, well, I don't know whether he'd get the Derby trip. He's probably a 10 furlong horse second half of the season. But the way he's typical Dubawis is furnished through the winter there, and also, like I said, what he did behind McSweeney there in the race in Post Trophy, he showed, for me, great courage that day, and the way he, like I say, the last 200 yards was where he went and put himself to go and finish second. A furlong down there, in that ground, you would have been questioning where he would finish, should we say? But like I say, his run style was that he galloped up as hard as he could in those conditions to the line, and then finished second. So I gave him a lot of credit for that, and it sort of gave you that little bit more of a sort of hope that 1.5 miles somewhere down the line could be in his bag.
How did he handle this morning's work? I mean, it was only a workout here. They weren't going at racing pace, but how did he handle the whole process of Epsom?
No, please. James said he was a bit fresh and keen going down to post there. So again, one of the reasons for coming here was, he's only had the one start going into the Derby so far, which was in the Guineas, as we know, and so to bring him here and just get a little bit of gas out of him and get him so his mind is on the job was one of the purposes of being here. And James said he was a bit keen going down to post, but he said they pulled him up a furlong down, walked him out, and just let him stand at the 7 pole there. And he's one of those horses, interestingly, as Kieran rides him so regularly at home, he says, when he stops to take a look at something, just let him look at something, and then he'll go forward again. And James just let him stand there at the 7 pole and just take a good look at everything, take it all in. And then he said he felt the horse just relax and popped away in his work, nice and switched off there. Came down the hill nice and balanced there again, as we saw there. They weren't going to go great fractions today in that ground. But the most pleasing part for me was from the 2, where James just said he was having a little look there, so we just asked him to step it up a gear. And just the way he's got that action, he lowers into the ground, and he did that this morning. And most importantly, he kept as straight as a gun barrel. He didn't try, and as we know, so many horses can just naturally just try to lean in on the camber here, but he ran true and straight.
And would it at all be lazy of us just to 3 years on from Masar? I know they both ran in the Guineas, but Masar had been to Dubai and he'd obviously done what he'd done in the Craven. Are there any comparisons to draw other than the fact that they're 3-year-olds going into the Derby for the same stable?
I suppose you could just say that both of them brought good 2-year-old form into their 3-year-old careers. Masar was out. I mean, this horse wouldn't have been running over 6 as Masar broke his maiden over 6. Sharper individual, and we saw what Masar did in the Craven. You wouldn't see this horse doing that, no. But as respects to their sort of Guineas runs, you can probably take little bits out of it that they were similar-ish. Masar, I'll never forget William getting off after the Guineas there and saying, he rode like a mile and a quarter horse, and dare I say it, those were the words that came out of James's, and I don't think we didn't prep him for that either. So, the quick question mark for her. For One Ruler will be the mile and a half. There's no doubt about it. But as we all know, if it's sensible ground on the day, and the last furlong there we're meeting the rising ground again, but you can get a good free wheel down that hill, and that might just help them along a little bit. And
One Ruler just had a wash down with his stable companion Adayar, who's got a different profile. But how much are you excited about getting him or learning a bit more about him as well in the Derby, because he hasn't had that much racing?
Adayar, he's. His profile, like I say, is a lot different to One Ruler's. He broke his maiden on very soft ground impressively at Nottingham on his second start there, and then came out and ran a very creditable race there at Sandown, doing it all the right way round. And to be honest with you, at Lingfield, as we all know, it can be as tricky coming down that bend as it can be round Epsom. And for a big horse, you could just see he was travelling very well, and when they started to increase the tempo of the race, he just took a stride or two to get himself organised.
I think a couple of them did that day as well, yeah.
And take nothing away from Roger's horse. He galloped strongly to the line, and we weren't going to get him back. But Roger's horse came down there like a cat, and whereas we looked a little bit unorganised slightly. So hopefully he'll gain some experience from that, and should we turn up on the day with him, that will put him in good stead.
And listen, the last question is on it's unique in ways, because these horses that are obviously still at the early stages of their development, and we call it the ultimate test of the thoroughbred, part of it is the crowd as well, and they won't have seen an awful lot of crowds in racing scenarios, I would imagine, so far. One Ruler and Adayar, it's not going to be full capacity, but there are going to be a few thousand here as well, so it's a little bit more of a test for the mental side of things as well for them, isn't it?
For sure. As we've spoken, before the season kicked off, we just said once crowds do start, for these 3-year-olds this year, they've never seen a crowd before in their lives. So that's going to be the first challenge that none of us are really going to know until the day, really, of how they're going to take that. But also, it's here we just stood up in the stands there now. You forget you've got to canter a mile and a half to post here. If you get a horse that's a bit keen and a bit fresh there, he can take a lot out of himself going down to start. So having that relaxed mindset is certainly a big plus coming here on the day, and that's why it is the ultimate test. It's not just mentally, physically, and it's for a 3-year-old, it's the biggest challenge of their lives. But I think we've got a nice team. I'd like to say team, but potentially 3 horses running in it that have all got their different styles of physically and mentally where they are, but I'm hopeful that one of them is going to be running a big race.
And the third one, who would be on the list?
So obviously, as we say, Hurricane Lane will come here straight after from his Dante success. He's in great form, can't the race well. He'll be ridden by William Buick. One Ruler will be ridden by James Doyle there, who's rode him around there this morning. And then we will, like I say, have discussions during the course of the week where Adayar is to take his chance as well. As we respect the head of the market, but after that, I think it's an open-looking derby.
It was quite exciting at York, wasn't he, Hurricane Lane?
He was, and he's very much a horse that's learning on the job, as we say. William was very pleased with him, and you know, the Dante, as we know, it's a great trial coming into the Derby, and for me, visually, and probably what was on paper, was the best trial that we've seen taken place, you know, in England this year.
Well, 3 chances then. Already a Derby winning trainer, and Charlie, best of luck going into next Saturday.
Thank you very much.